So what we want to, let me bring this over to VGA. So in this, in your lab assignment that you have for today, some of the things that you're going to be going after are going after and calculating these, comparing the systolic, diastolic pressure and everything. You can use the group data for that. So meaning the entire sections data that's on that spreadsheet that we have on Google Docs. So that's what we have here. So some of the questions that they're interested in having you be able to understand are, and let me just kind of delete that. Let's just do Excel. Okay. I can't make that move up. There we go. Forget it. Okay. So what we have here on Google Docs is what we've seen. So on this side over here, this is when we are actually, one sec. Supine, and this is standing. So a couple of things that we need to be able to kind of zero in on and really understand as we look at this. So we're going to compare heart rate. Systolic and diastolic pressure are going to be used to help calculate pulse pressure and mean arterial pressure. The major themes that come out of this is that we're going to compare standing versus lying down. So that's the diff HR is basically saying standing versus lying down. And so if you look at the average here, 7.36 is the average that we got of the difference in the heart rate between standing versus lying down. So most people's heart rate went up about 7 beats per minute. So 65 to 69, 73 to 76. 73 to 93, hello, 110 to 106, I don't know what's going on there. 92 to, but you get the idea, right? There is some, so that's increased there. So your heart rate went up. And the question is going to be, well, why did the heart rate actually increase? There's another thing that happened, and that's going to be related to this as well. In the diastolic, you see that the diastolic value also went up. So both the heart rate and the diastolic values went up. So now it's 8.93 as an average. And the mean arterial pressure also went up. So all of these different values increased when we look at this. So what's the story that we're getting from these readings that you guys took? Really simple exercise, but something's changing in your body as you're doing that. So what I want to do is I want to illustrate each of those different points on this handout. So this is something that is on Blackboard, so you can use it to track what you've got going on. And one thing what's happening is that you're working with a baroreceptor reflex. This is something that we actually went through before the quiz. You guys asked questions about it, so we were able to kind of go through, talk about how we have these this reflex that helps to control sympathetic and parasympathetic innervation into the heart. We talked about stroke volume and heart rate. Great. So those are the things that have actually changed. The other thing that happens that's important to know is that total peripheral resistance typically will go up when you're trying to increase your blood pressure. So total peripheral resistance is because the sympathetic system is constricting your arterial. That's the way it ends up working. So it causes a squeezing of the arterial there. And this actually matters when we think about what's going to be happening in our supine versus standing and some of what's going on. So I'm walking over here because what I'm going to demo here is that when you're lying down, so nice to lie down actually. So what we're doing now is you can see that, well, you can't see it, but imagine that there's no gravity pulling. My heart can push the blood all throughout and perfuse my body all the way along as I lie on this table. It doesn't have to fight gravity. So there's less blood pressure needed to have that occur. As I stand up, sometimes with patients or people who are weak or recovering from something, they'll fall down as they stand up, or they get off the toilet or something like that. What's happening is that when you stand up, gravity is another force that your circulatory system has to fight to bring it back up. It adds blood pressure. And so your baroreceptor reflexes detect this drop in blood pressure as it's starting to pool in towards the bottom of your feet. So now it's all kind of down here, and it's not coming back as readily because you've added more force. That venous return has dropped. When you drop back your venous return, because you stand up, and now gravity's kind of pulling it back a little bit, that drops your blood pressure, and then that causes all of these things, heart rate, stroke volume, TPR, to increase. So we saw your heart rate go up in that one thing when you stood up. We didn't measure this in this particular exercise, but your stroke volume also went up. You had a more forceful ejection from your heart. TPR helps to explain the other one, which is diastolic. That diastolic pressure changed. That's weird. Why would that change? To understand how TPR works and what that means for diastolic pressure, I have another simple diagram here, and it looks hairy when you see all of this stuff kind of crammed in here. But what I want you to do is we'll just trace out this part right here, showing the heart feeding into the arterial side, and then ultimately supplying the capillaries with, perfusing the capillaries, that ultimately then returns back through the venous system into the heart itself. So when you stand up, or when you, before I get into that, TPR. What is TPR? TPR is about your arterial constriction, how much constriction there is. It's the resistance in which your blood has as it moves through the circulatory system. And the dominant resistor in the system, the thing that really helps determine flow from one part of the circulatory system, like the arterial side to the venous side, is the arteriole. So we're kind of squeezing down there, and that makes it hard for the blood to move over to the other side. And that's good in some ways. And the reason it's good is because it helps to keep the blood on this side, and you have an increase in blood volume, which makes the pressure higher. So it's like a garden hose or something, other kind of hose, where you actually, as you push it back, or you squeeze on it, it'll create more back pressure here. And then whatever holes you do happen to have open, you're going to get a nice flow out of. So same with a garden hose. You make the hole smaller, you increase the back pressure, but it's shooting out at a faster rate. So whatever places are actually open will allow that to flow out. But you've increased your back pressure here. And that idea of back pressure is related to this part right here, where it says increased diastolic. That increase in diastolic pressure is because of the increase in TPR. When you stand up, you've crimped this movement of blood from one side to the other, so you have more backup. So even when the heart is relaxed and pushing blood into here, or after it's finished pushing blood in here, there's more pressure. So your heart rate improved because of this, the baroreceptor reflex. And that also affected your stroke volume. And so that's easy to kind of talk about with the sympathetic system. That's really familiar. But it also increased TPR because it constricted the arterioles. And that increase in TPR is what explains that, that's why we have a higher diastolic pressure. It's because we've squeezed down here and made it so that we have more back pressure on this arterial side. So that's the insight that we want to capture from those data. So the next thing that we talked about, and the next data set elaborates on this. But before I move into it, does this make sense? Okay. All right. Awesome. So then, for those of you who actually did the exercise part, thank you. I can go through that. But I want to talk about a little bit of what's going on in your body. So this is important because it's easy to get this confused. It's a stumbling block that sometimes people have with it. So, all right, when you exercise, you think, oh, I'm running away from a lion, I'm going to try to get away, whatever it is, right? You know, everything's on, your heart rate's up, your stroke volume's up, everything like that, epinephrine's flowing, all of those types of things. So you're under exercise and you're trying to move quickly. So you know, your blood pressure goes up, and it does go up. But the odd thing about this is that if you look at what happens to your mean arterial pressure under exercise, if we went through and calculated from this value right up here, heart rate times stroke volume times TPR equals mean arterial pressure. And let's pretend that we didn't change total peripheral resistance. When your heart rate increased by fivefold, or not fivefold, sorry, but twofold or so, or whatever it was that actually increased, your mean arterial pressure did not increase twofold. It did, you blow a gasket. So you have something that's allowing you to accommodate this increase in cardiac output. The heart rate and your stroke volume have gone up because of exercise, but somehow your mean arterial pressure did not go up by twofold. So let's take a look at that data that people have on that and just pick an example out of it and see what see if this actually follows suit. So here we are with group 1. And what we're looking at here is their heart rate before exercise. Oh, this person's in shape. Okay, so 80 here, then it goes up to 97 and it starts to drop back down here. But the mean arterial pressure looks like it actually went down a little bit, which is unusual. But even though the heart rate went up. For others, what typically happens is that there is an increase in the mean arterial pressure, but it's usually not the same magnitude as what you see here. So let's go down to this one. 81 here, heart rate was 92, and then it goes up to 140. But this difference here, let's say that it's 1.5, is not the same as what this is here. So we're not seeing as dramatic of an increase there. And likewise, if we look in this case, let's say this is a twofold difference here, from 63 to 144. This is 80 to 140. That's not a twofold increase in the, or more than twofold increase in mean arterial pressure relative to what we have here. The purpose of this is something has to accommodate that extra cardiac output. So what's the deal? How does that work? And the answer to that is TPR. Your total peripheral resistance, when you calculate it, you can see it here for the folks that we have. Let's take a look at group 1, or even this one here. Let's take a look at this one, group 4's data here. What group 4 had, the TPR was around 22, and then it dropped down to 15, and then bounced up, but then stayed down again, and starting to kind of bounce around here. But right after exercise, it dropped a lot. And most people's drop a lot right after exercise. And the reason is because your arterioles have opened up. So the key thing I want to make sure you guys get is we can see in this image that I have here. What happened? I thought you exercise, you can think, golly, if I exercise, heart rate, stroke volume, doesn't my TPR, wouldn't that also increase? Wouldn't I get more resistance? And the answer is, if you didn't exercise, then the arterioles would constrict. But as you exercise, there's another factor that comes in, local vasodilators. These open up the arterioles in the regions that you were actually exercising. So what's going on here? Your sympathetic nervous system has cranked up the blood pressure by increasing heart rate, stroke volume, and TPR. And it did all of that. Good job, sympathetic nervous system. Did it throughout the body. But you need blood to flow in places where you need perfusion and where you're going to have metabolic activity. So the local vasodilators open up and allow that high pressure blood to go into and perfuse those tissues. And that's what allows it to occur. If you exercise enough, then you can actually see that there's enough opening up of all of these different arterioles that you can actually see it register on the calculations of the total peripheral resistance that you guys actually did. So it's really kind of a cool effect. And those local vasodilators are listed down here. And most of these are related to metabolism. So cardiac, CO2, an increase in CO2, drop in oxygen, lactic acid, or a drop in pH. Potassium, which is one of the things that happens when neurons and muscles fire, potassium leaves the cells, and accumulation of potassium ends up adding to that as well. So that is part of the reason that you see those types of effects. So those are some of the major key points I wanted to talk about as you're going through this. So you will be asked to make some graphs. They're really simple bar graphs. So I have the sheets that you've been filling in to help you accumulate your data and to be able to answer some of those questions. But you'll need to be able to make the bar graphs on your own. It's pretty straightforward. Let me know if you have questions or as you're going through this. I can help you with the reports. Good job today, you guys.